Hi everyone, welcome back to Curve&stitch. Today we are going to learn how to draft this beautiful Ankara dress. It is simple, stylish and perfect for beginners. Let's get started. First we will need our pattern drafting tools. But before taking any measurements for the dress, first we need to analyze the style to know what it entails, what will be required and the measurements we will need. Then we need accurate body measurements of the following measurement. Let's start drafting. The first line you need is the shoulder guideline. So draw a straight line from the edge of the paper. Leave about 1 to 2 inches before drawing this line to use as your shoulder guideline. Sorry, I lost the shot when I was creating the shoulder line. What I did was I just left some few inches from the edge of the paper. Then I drew a line to use as my shoulder guideline. So you just draw a straight line. You leave about 1 inch from the top of the paper, then you draw a straight line to use as your shoulder guideline. So now, after analyzing everything, we can see that there's a slit in the front. So we will need slit allowance at the center front. So from the edge of the paper, that's the initial center front, we will measure and mark 1 centimeter to create a new line. That will be our center front line. So the marks we are making is for the center front slit allowance. Because of the slit we will need at the center front, we will not cut the front unfold, but rather we will cut 2 pieces and then join together later. So since we'll be joining the 2 pieces together, we need seam allowance. So this line I'm creating now is the seam allowance we will need at the center front to be able to join the 2 pieces together. Now, from the shoulder guideline, we will measure and mark our shoulder to bust measurement, which in this case, I'm using 10 inches. So from the shoulder, I'll measure and mark 10 inches and mark like so. Draw a straight line to create the bust guideline like so. Now, from the shoulder, I'll measure and mark my shoulder to waist measurement, which in this case, I'm using 16 inches. So I'll measure and mark 16 inches and mark like so. This is now the waist guideline. Again, from the shoulder, I'll measure and mark the dress length measurement, which in this case, I'm using 35 inches. So from the waist, I'll measure and mark 35 inches and mark like so. Then draw a straight line to create the dress or the hem line. On the shoulder line, we are going to place our neck measurement. So in this case, I'm using the basic neck measurement, which is 3 inches. So I'll measure the width of the neck, 3 inches, the depth of the front neck, depending how deep you want it. This is the bust line. The closer you get to the bust line, the more you'll be showing your chest. So this case, wanted it a bit deeper, but not to the bust area. So I used 6.5 inches for the neck depth. I'm going for a V-neck. So you can use the straight part. If you want a straight V, you can just use the straight part of the ruler to draw the neck. Or if you want it a bit curvy, like what I wanted, you can just use the curved side of your ruler to create the V for the dress. So now we need our shoulder measurement, which in this case, the shoulder is 14 inches. 14 divided by 2 is 7 inches. In this style, the shoulder and the sleeve are cut together. There's no joining. So you add the sleeve we want for this dress to the measurement. So in this case, from the shoulder point, I'll add the sleeve length I want for the dress to it. So I'm using 8 inches for the sleeve length. So now from the shoulder guideline, I'll measure down 1.5 inches to create the shoulder slant or the shoulder slope like so. Join the slope mark to the shoulder with a line like so. You can use the straight part of the ruler if you want. It's total design preference. Now we need to input our sleeve opening measurement. So from the sleeve, we will measure and mark the sleeve opening measurement, which in this case I'm using 7.5 inches. So from the sleeve end, I'll measure and mark 7.5 like so. Then join it to the sleeve to create the sleeve opening just like so. Now from the sleeve opening line I just drew, I'll go inward 2.5 inches to draw a slant line to use as my new sleeve opening line. This is totally optional. It's just a design preference. So whichever one you want, you can either use what I'm using or you can use the original line to create your sleeve opening. Now we need to input our bust measurements. A shift dress is not a close fit dress and it's not a baggy dress too. So you need to add in a little bit of design ease, not too much that it becomes too loose, but it shouldn't be a close fit dress either. So in this case, I'm adding just 1 inch ease allowance to the measurements. So the total ease will be 4 inches, which is not a close fit, yet it's not a baggy dress too. And for the waist measurement was 6.5 inches. Then I'll add 1 inch design ease to it, making it 7.5 inches. So I'll measure and mark 7.5 just like so. Sorry, I forgot to draw the hip line. So now I'm going ahead to draw the hip line for the dress. So from the shoulder, I'll measure 24 inches to draw the hip guideline just like so. Now on the hip guideline, I'll measure and mark 1/4 of the hip measurement, which in this case is 9 inches. Then I'll add the design ease, which is 1 inch, making 10 inches. So I'll measure and mark 10 inches like so. We'll move to the hem line. So on the hem line, measure and mark 1/4 of your hip circumference measurement without the ease. But if you like to, you can just use the measurement you use on the hip line on the hem line to get the hem measurement. Now that we have all our marks, we'll go ahead and join the hem line to the hip line, then from the hip line then to the waistline with a smooth curve like so. Then we'll join the waistline to the bust line. Then join the bust line to the arm opening line with a smooth curve like so. Make sure you smooth all sharp edges. Then go ahead and add your seam allowance to the dress. So on the neck, I added 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then on the shoulder line, I added 1/2 inch seam allowance. At the sleeve opening, I added 1 inch seam allowance. Then at the side seam line, I added 1 inch seam allowance all through. You can add more or less. If you don't have any intentions of opening the seams, then 1/2 inch all through will be fine. Join the marks you made to create the seam allowance line just like so. I'm using a different pen to create the seam allowance line so that I will not cause any confusions. So I'm using a red pen to create the seam allowance line. When drafting, make sure that all your edges are smooth so that it will be easy for you to cut and sew. Now that we are done adding all the seam allowance, you go ahead and then cut the pattern. But make sure you label all your pattern. If you are going to add zip to the back pattern of the dress, then the only difference between the front and the back will be the neckline. So you will go ahead and trace the exact front to create the back instead of drafting a new pattern. This is where my tracing wheel came in handy. You are going to add zip to the back of your dress. Make sure you add zip allowance to the center back of the dress. But in my case, I didn't add zip allowance to the back because I was thinking of adding the zip to the front instead. So where I had the slit allowance, I'll just add an invisible zip there, so I wouldn't need a zip at the back. But if you want to add the zip at the back, you have to add your zip allowance to the back pattern of the dress. If you are going to add zip allowance to the dress, then you can just copy exactly the pattern and then edit or alter the neckline, because it's only the neckline that is different. So you just alter the neckline. So in this case, the neck depth I'll be using is 1.5 inches. So you just draw 1.5 inches and then create the neckline for the back part of the dress. Now go ahead and add your back neck seam allowance to it. So in this case, I added 1/2 inch seam allowance to the back neck. After that, you can go ahead and cut your back pattern. Make sure everything is where it's supposed to be before you start cutting. Make sure you label all your pattern pieces. Make sure you have all the lines you have on the front at the back. Now the front and the back part of the dress is ready. Let's go ahead and draft the side pockets for the dress. So if you want to create a side pocket, easiest way for you is to spread your hands just like what I've done. Then trace, so just trace the outline of your open arm, just like that, to create the pocket shape. So this is how I always create my pocket. I'll just open my hands and then I'll trace the outline of my hands to create the pocket. Now on the gown, we need to locate where we want to put the pocket. So from the shoulder, I'll measure down. In this case, I wanted the pocket right under the waistline. So from the shoulder, I measured 17 inches to place the pocket. That will be the start point for the pocket. Then add the pocket opening measurement, which in this case is 5 inches. So I'll measure down 5 inches and mark like so. So this is now the pocket opening for this dress. Notch the points so that you'll be able to match it to the other side of the dress when you are sewing it. Locate the pocket placement for the back part too and notch it just like you did for the front. Since this is an inside pocket, we will need 2 pieces to join together to create the pocket. So we will need seam allowance on the pocket. So I'm going ahead to add 1/2 inch seam allowance all around the pocket to create the pocket seam allowance. I'm just drawing my seam allowance line just like so. So I'll be sewing on this green line. The size of the pocket is what is in the middle. The outside line is seam allowance, which will not be part of the pocket. So the actual pocket is the space in the green line and not the outside line. So the pocket size is what I have in the green line. So this is the size of the pocket. Was this video helpful? If it was, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more. Share with friends and family. Comment what you want us to draft next. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.